from all participants from different parts of the world, some of whom are dear friends and colleagues, and all of us, are members of the community of educators. When it came to think about the objectives of this workshop, I felt that it would be more useful to focus on certain aspects of the DP history course at the higher end level, standard level. And the first objective of this very mini workshop is to talk about the principles of putting a history course together and explore assessment components related to this history course, and explore strategies that we need to adopt in order to develop a comprehensive and a holistic history assessment policy. Agenda, we will look very quickly at the IB assessment philosophy. We will have a history assessment overview, and we will look at the history external assessment guideline, what we call the internal component of the course that is taken by our student at higher and standard level, which highlights its importance for the development of history skills amongst our students. And there is also a very short exercise provided to you to look at an exemplar of an internal investigation done by one of my students. It's an independent material, not retrieved from the IB. And also another paper to essay done by one of my students. So as we brainstorm together and highlight differences and similarities we reached at in regards to assessment. Okay, and the first section of this workshop is we are going to look at the history diploma program, and very quickly, as you might all know, being experienced on history teachers from different schools, that the history course, like many other or most of the IB courses, it's an evidence-based discipline that engages students in rigorous intellectual discussions regarding concepts, which are 6 concepts in the history course, and they provide the overarching umbrella for learning and teaching, and they are change and consequences, they are causation and significance, perspective and causation. Usually, I find when I put those, when I'm planning for my lessons, I find that, for example, causation and consequence go very well together, and we link to them historical concepts like perspectives, like significance, which is why is this historical investigation is important, and a change. When change happens, what consequences are induced by the change considered. So this is a very quick touch upon, and we will further discuss it as we go through the workshop. And one thing about history, especially amongst those of us who ourselves needed to go through a huge paradigm shift in our predisposition as teachers who came, where their training was very traditional. We looked at history when we were young, or we were taught that history was a story, that history is a boring subject, that history, just needs you to memorize events, and that's the end of your role as a learner. The IB history is a different kind of a course. It's based on inquiry and taking into consideration the explanatory approach, which takes into consideration different perspectives of interpretation of one historical event, and history is rich and with examples that lend themselves to such a predisposition regarding the teaching and the learning process. And this is a very quick overview of what is history in the IB and what purposes does it serve and its intellectual predisposition in regards to how we as how our students learn the course and how we teach it. Looking at the IB assessment philosophy, which is the focus of this workshop, is that, again, we're looking at the dynamism of the historical narrative, which can be contested, okay, and contested in regards to evidence that is proposed or provided by the historian. And this is something of great importance because, as we also know as history teachers, that historical knowledge could be manipulated heavily for all different kinds of purposes, ideological, political, and nationalistic. And the students should be given the chance to consider those perspectives when they learn a historical account. And they are very much should and are usually encouraged to provide those critiques in relation by relating what is being written or said or presented to the history 6 concepts that the IB identified. Again, as I have said before, the exploration component reflects itself in regards to taking into consideration the different perspectives, their values and their limitations, as well as what they tell us about the historical interpretation when it is taking place. This could highlight the selection bias, it could highlight all the shortcomings as well as the strengths, which we refer to as values and limitations when we are writing a historical essay or doing an investigation, or even when our students engage in presentations. Okay, let's look at history at a glance. Okay, history, as many of you may know, is offered at a higher end standard level. It is very important that when we allocate time in our timetables, that we stick to those stipulated 240 hours for higher and 150 for standard, because when the IB evaluation visit team comes, they look at our timetables, and if we teach much more than is stipulated by the subject guide, they would give you a recommendation not to do so. And also the guide provides, it's a very important document for us because it provides for us the roadmap how to plan the course, whereby 40 hours are allocated to paper 1, 90 hours are allocated to both paper 2 and paper 3 respectively. And higher and standard level students take paper 1, sit for paper 1 and paper 2. There are no differences whatsoever. They sit for the same papers and with the same requirements, and there is no distinction in the expectations and the knowledge, skills and conceptual knowledge that need to be reflected by all students. And the internal assessment component is the same for both higher and standard level students. No distinctions are also made in this respect. Those are the aims of assessment as is stipulated by the IB. The course provides us with understanding of the past, which also could be argued to enable us also have an understanding of our present, especially in contexts where students live through very controversial historical events like myself. You know, I'm old enough. I lived through 2 wars, and I lived through a civil war in my home country, Lebanon. And history enabled me, provided me with a lot of skills that were very, very fruitful to reflect and understand the past as well as the present. As I have said before, this history course, okay, focuses on the importance of multiple perspectives, because history is at the end written by humans and for different purposes. And this is a very important aspect about the complexity of this discipline. History is not a straightforward academic course where 1 + 1 is equal to 2. Hence, the different perspectives could explain the historical concepts differently, and it could also explain events and their respective developments differently. The course is very much promotes international mindedness, and this is a very important component in the IB philosophy as well, international mindedness. We are, our job, okay, or not our job, you know, the purpose of the history course is to make students open to the idea that a historical event is open to various discussions, and when we are open to this process, we become open-minded, and then it enables us develop our historical consciousness regarding chronology, the context of the historical event, and again, you know, perspectives. We keep talking about the understanding of different historical perspective, because this taps into the international mindedness. This taps into enabling us acquire as students different perspectives and interpretations, and consequently evaluation and synthesis of the same historical event. You know, the course enables us to develop key historical skills that are facilitated by paper 1, whereby our students engage in the analysis, evaluation, and synthesis of both primary and secondary sources of information. And the last one, you know, I say it with a smile, because I wonder the extent to which we enable our students achieve it, understand themselves, okay, and of contemporary society by encouraging reflection on the past. I hope we do that, because this is a very important skill to develop amongst our students. Again, you know, other those are highlighted. there was supposed to be here a, can you press please on the Padlet, okay, and do a very quick, you should be able to do a very quick activity in reading those aims and highlighting the keywords in every one of them, and then I will share with you the answers. Can you please do that? Press on the Padlet and do it. You will be given 5 minutes to do that. I will now share with you the other slide that highlights the important words or phrases in every one. The first one highlighted the past. The second one is multiple perspectives. The third one is international mindedness. And then the fourth one, we have historical consciousness, different historical perspectives. The fifth one is key historical skills, and the sixth one is understanding of themselves. This is also, again, I'm coming back to the handy timetable, looking at the papers 1 and 2. For standard level, we have paper 1 for 1 hour, paper 2 for 1.5 hours. This is 2.5 hours of examination, and the historical investigation is usually it is advised that we allocate 20 hours to it. So paper 1 is 30% of the grade for the standard level students. Paper 2 is 45, the historical investigation is 25%, and the sum is 100%. For the higher level, we have 3 papers with a total of 5 hours examination, 1 hour for paper 1. Paper 1 and paper 2 are like the standard level, and in addition, higher level students, they take to another paper 3, which is 2.5 hours of examinations. The IA historical investigation is also allocated 20 hours, and the percentages are 20 to 25, 35, and 20% respectively for the 3 papers and the historical investigation. Okay, now this is a very, very important table that I retrieved from the history deep guide about the 4 important components of assessment in the IB. 1 is related to knowledge and understanding. 2 is application and analysis. So here it's very important for us as history teacher not to dismiss the importance of content, okay, because it will, knowing the content will enable the students to apply and analyze the knowledge they attain. Synthesis and evaluation, number 3, use and application of appropriate skills. And here, each one of them is indicated, indicates the relevance to the respective history papers 1, 2, and 3, as well as the historical investigation. Knowledge and understanding is related to the 3 papers, with in addition to the internal assessment and paper 1 when we analyze the courses. Application and analysis, again, okay, we find it in all the papers. And then we look at integrating evidence and analysis to produce a coherent response. And we will talk about this as we go through the presentation, because a coherent response is, something that secures for the students a good performance in the paper or the internal assessment that is being taken. And use and application of appropriate skills, again, this is strongly reflected when the students do their internals, their history investigation, and also use application and appropriate skills. This is also found in paper 1, it's found in paper 2, and it's found in paper 3. So those 4 strands, overarching strands of the historical or of assessment, are strongly present in all the papers and the historical investigation. I chose paper 2 because due to time limitations, I prefer to focus on paper 2, because usually from teaching the course for a long period of time, I noticed it is, the most challenging paper for my student. I don't know if you agree or disagree with me, because it requires from the student a high level of conceptual understanding, which our students or my students often wrestle with, and it needs a lot of reinforcement, training, and for them to master such a skill, which is, for 16 and 17-year-olds is not something easy. With time it will come to them, but again, we understand the complexity of mastering such a skill. Okay. Paper 2, as I have said before, it's a 1.5-hour paper. It requires students to choose to answer 2 essay questions. And we often, because we divide the 1.5 hours between those 2 questions, and we say 45 minutes should be allocated for each question. And the questions cannot be chosen from the same topic. If the students were taught about the Cold War, authoritarian leader, causes of wars, something about medieval history like the Fatimids, okay, they have to choose a question from one topic and the second question from another topic. So the number of topics we usually teach to our students is minimally 2, and if we can cover 3, that would be, we give students more choice. It depends. Okay, but it is also to teach 3 topics is quite challenging because it entails a lot of work on the part of the student, which they don't always, seem prepared to do. And this paper, if I have myself, made for my students booklets of past papers given after the course changed since 2017. Okay, and we've noticed, if we look at the questions given, the principal examiner seems to like compare and contrast questions. Okay, so it would be a good strategy for us as history teachers to train our students to answer those kinds of questions. And the topics covered by paper 2, as it does for paper 3, gives us a huge range of historical epochs from medieval to modern times. So this is a huge strength of the course. Some of you might remember when we used to have 2 history courses, a medieval one, and it was a history of the Islamic world. It started. And then we realized it's quite a discriminatory term because the Islamic world is part of the world. It's not, doesn't exist in isolation. And then it became a medieval history. And then we went towards a paradigm change to say one history course that has all this wide range of historical epochs to teach our students. This course, this paper necessitates that they do have a conceptual understanding of the topics that they have studied. One major challenge I have every year, and maybe some of you do face it, my students always persistently confuse the rise with the consolidation and maintenance of power. You ask them about rise to power of an authoritarian leader or 2, and then they mix it with the consolidation of power or the maintenance of power. This is something that personally I do wrestle with. I don't know about you, but I thought it's worthwhile mentioning. In addition, okay, the training of the students to link the question to TOK concepts is a given. It's highly recommended due to its need. That's what enables students to acquire high marks. And then this is, strategies for student success. Okay, step one is to help the students unpack the essay question. Because if they don't acquire this skill of unpacking a knowledge question, they will never master the requirements or requirements for doing well on paper 2. And here, teaching students how to unpack the question is a recommended strategy that will be very helpful for our students to perform well when they take their exam. Also, they have to understand the implications of the command words used by the question. For example, here we have discussed the developments that affected the trade of 2 societies, each from a different region. Each from a different region means, and this kind of a requirement reflects itself in all the topics of paper 2. If we teach about authoritarian leaders, it lends itself, to teach paper 1. If we are teaching about the move to global war, it is quite, attractive to teach about Mussolini and Hitler for paper 2, but that's not enough. We need to teach about a third leader from a different region, such as North America, Castro or Peron or Nasser of Egypt, or you can teach about Saddam Hussein in Iraq, if you are teaching, or any other. Europe is one region, whether it's East or West. If we teach about Stalin's emergence to power, we need another leader from a different region, either the Middle East and Africa, as is stipulated by the DP guide, or Latin America, or the Americas, or the Oceania, or so on and so forth. It depends, where you, where you are located and what needs you have in your locations. Okay, when we have a question, students should learn that their first is to define command term, identify and define key concepts, causation, change, or perspective of significance. Why is a historical event significant? Okay, determine the subject matter. What is the focus of the paper? Is it about causes of the Cold War? Is it about, whether Truman was responsible for the beginning of the Cold War, or whether it was a joint responsibility between him and Stalin, or between the 2 spheres of influence? And which is very significant. The Cold War is a very significant historical event because it affected international relations up till 1990, when the USSR collapsed. Identify 2 societies to explore, one from each different region, like choosing to write about Stalin and rise to power, or whatever, in the Soviet Union, and Nasser in Egypt. This development that affected the trade of 2 societies, we can choose, this is a medieval option, we can choose to talk about trade, Italian trade among city-states, and fatimid trade, because they overlapped at certain period of time, or they have a historical affinity to each other. And then, as I have said, choose each society from a different region. This is there is no, it should be made very clear that there is no magic formula for writing a history essay, but those are some suggestions that when we train our students to write an effective and a successful history essay, we tell them that the introduction has to have a hook, a background, and a thesis, and then the body should have a claim. And here it's written counterclaim, which in history we say an alternative perspective, okay, for explaining the concept under consideration. And then rebuttal, and if we are doing a compare and a contrast essay, we say contrast 1, contrast 2, comparison 1, and comparison 2. Contrast and comparison are another words for similarities and differences. Okay, and the paragraph should be made of a point that is explained, supported by evidence, and linked to the concept, and this can reflect itself point of comparison or contrast, both political regime used propaganda. That's a comparison. And then you explain, provide evidence, and link back to the question. In all cases, students, when they write essays, they really need to not forget what they are being asked about. Okay. And then in the conclusion, we wrap up what we have said, and we provide a final response to the thesis backed by the evidence. For example, choosing to write about 2 authoritarian leaders reflects, for example, the extensive reliance on force, use of intimidation, coercion, propaganda, brainwashing, control of the media, control of the educational system, and so on and so forth. How do we train our students to succeed in when taking a paper 2? They really need to be trained to master writing an essay within 45 minutes. Within those 45 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes need to be spent on the writing of an outline. Again, I come back that this needs mastery of the content, which enables a quick writing of the outline. And then over a long period of teaching, rarely, but it happens, students say, I liked this question in topic 3 and I answered it, when we never taught topic 3 or 4 or 5. Students should only answer questions that they have been taught in class. They shouldn't make those, adventurous decisions when they are taking their IB exams. And it's very important that when they are providing or developing their outline, they should identify the conceptual grounding of the essay. The conceptual grounding of the essay in reference to a region, as the IB indicates them. Number 1 is Africa and the Middle East, 2, Europe, 3, the Americas, 4, Asia and Oceania. And they can't choose the 2 case studies they are referring to in their questions. When the question stipulates that they can't choose it from the same region, and even if the question doesn't ask it, it would enrich the answer by considering 2 regions. This is an activity that I want you to do. Sorry. The activity is determine the different elements in the question and share via the chat box. Command term, region, subject matter, and concept examples. The question is, with reference to 2 rulers from 2 different regions, compare and contrast the methods used to consolidate their power. So here,
okay, so Kaizen in chat, some chat responses are already coming. Kaizen has said command terms, compare and contrast.
Yeah.
Same, Kariman says compare and contrast. Region, 2 rulers each from a different region.
Yes. Region, 2 rulers each from a different region. Yeah, 2 different regions. Command term, compare and contrast.
Yes. Subject matter methods used to consolidate or consolidation of power.
Shall we proceed?
Yeah, there's one more response by Hisham for concept, and the answer is change and continuity.
Change and continuity.
Yeah.
Hi, Hisham. Miss you.
Me too.
Okay,
yeah,
shall
I think we can proceed. Yeah, we can proceed.
Okay, thank you. So here, the process, okay, define command term, determine the subject matter, identify examples. All of this has been, choose each ruler from a different region and identify and define key concepts. As Hisham's, highlighted, it could be a change and continuity. It could be causation and consequence, but it has to be, it has to be identified. Okay, sorry. Here we go, paper 2 moderation. There is a paper for one of my students, and take 5 minutes to moderate it, and then write in the here they have to, you have to complete the poll regarding the grade you have given. Okay. Okay, proceed. I will give you, is 10 minutes, is it 10 minutes, or shall we say 5? Okay, take 7 minutes. We'll take 7 minutes for the moderation of the paper. Please don't forget to complete the poll.
We have like 1 minute more. And for anyone who might be a little confused, there'll be a poll on Zoom. You can actually just click the polls button and the poll will pop up on your screen and you can select your answer there.
Okay. Okay, thank you. We have 20 seconds. Okay, thank you. Now, 5 of the 11 participants who corrected the paper gave it between 10 to 12, 4 between 7 to 9, 2 between 4 and 6, and 1 between 13 and 15. And okay, and I'm going to end the poll now, and those are the results. Okay, and I will go to the paper itself. This was one of my students, one of the very capable students, but she hasn't finished the essay actually. It isn't wrapped up as it needs to. I gave her 8/15. That was the grade given to her based on training received from the IB when I was an examiner. You know, an incomplete essay is never accorded in the last 2 bands, regardless of the quality of the completed sections. This is important for us to understand as teachers. Okay, let's see the poll. We have seen it. I have shared it with you, and now we come to the internal assessment guidance, which is also at 20% of the grade for the high level students and 25% for the standard level. And this component is really supports the students acquiring a respectful grade or an excellent grade. So it is worthwhile that they focus on it. This is his internal assessment overview. It is suggested word allocation if we pay attention here. For the first section, identification and evaluation of sources, it is suggested that we stick to the 500. Sometimes we write 600, which is okay, but don't make it a 1000 part, because this will put the investigation, which is a very important component of the internal, because if you look here at the grade, the marks allocation, the investigation is allocated 15 marks, which means it is the most important part of the investigation. So here reserve the biggest amount or number of words to this section. The students would be at an advantage. So the 500, 1,300, 400 respectively of word allocation for the 3 sections. And these students need to use the same wording for those 3 sections, such as one is our section A, identification and evaluation of sources, 2 is investigation, and 3 is reflection. the bibliography is not part of the word count, and the word count for the history internal or the history investigation is 2,200 words. It's the allocation of marks here is 25 for the standard. For the higher, it's only 25, is only 20. Okay, again, we come to the history assessment objectives, and you will find those 4 components that I referred to in when discussing the assessment objectives of the IB. They are, of course, they are relevant. Knowledge and understanding, we need to demonstrate our understanding of the historical sources that we have chosen. We analyze the sources we refer to. We evaluate and synthesize, and then when we apply appropriate skills, we need to reflect, formulate, and demonstrate. And see how command terms, they keep recurring when we talk about any aspect of the history course, because they are the engine that guide the course itself. When the topic the students choose need not be related to the syllabus. Maybe or one of us is teaching modern history. The focus is modern history in papers 1, 2, and 3. But the student chooses to write an investigation about a medieval topic. There is no, it's acceptable. Okay, this needs not be frowned upon. We need to respect the 10 years. We can't write about something that happened 2 or 3 years ago. It has to be at least 10 years ago and beyond. And the 3 sections are those, as I have indicated, and they should appear in the 3 components of the essay in addition to bibliography. We use bibliography, works cited, references, okay, in accordance to the citation tradition we have used, whether it's MLA, Harvard, Chicago, and so on and so forth. All right. The 20 hours, this is a proposition. It's not set in stone. This is something that I have developed based on my experience. 2 hours in class, 5 hours in library, 7 hours writing the first draft, and 6 hours is producing the final draft after the students receive this teacher feedback on the first draft, which is, we give feedback only once. All right, we only give it once. The first section, don't make the students write an introductory paragraph. This happens in the investigation section. Okay, in the first section, okay, the research question of this investigation will examine, and you write the research question, and then you analyze the 2 sources of information chosen, and they have to be strongly related to the knowledge question. The relevance here is very important. And in this section, we analyze the value and limitations of the origin, the purpose, and the content of the source. And those need to be written in a clear, straightforward manner. The clearer what you are, what the student is doing, the examiner will not be frustrated and then the grades will automatically go down. Okay, make it very clear, very relevant, and very straightforward. You would ask what kind of sources to choose. If readily available and the knowledge question allows it, a primary and secondary source. A primary source could be a cartoon, a speech, okay, a photo if it lends itself to good analysis, and so on and so forth. And here is to formulate an appropriate question. And the question needs really to be focused on a very specific historical event. And we can use a good strategy is to use one of the 6 or 2 of the 6 historical concepts and formulating the research question. Okay. To what extent, for example, a defeat in a battle had the consequence of a leader's removal from power. And here we are looking at a very specific historical event, okay? And in subsequent slides, we will look at a suggestion of developing the research question of the historical investigation. Here are some examples. For example, look how specific they are. Look at the inclusion of research question of dates, okay? And usually they don't go beyond, never cover more than 10 years, and this is too much. 5 years, 2-3 years, an event that happened on a specific date is also advisable. How systematic were the deportations of the Jewish population of Düsseldorf to Minsk between 1941 and 1942? This could be used as a guidance to also indicate how systematic were the deportations of the Palestinian population of a certain region in Palestine to neighboring Arab countries in 1948 or 1940, So this provides a very good guidance that would make the investigations made by the students very focused. Look at the last one. To what extent was weak leadership responsible for the collapse of the Egyptian Old Kingdom in 2025 BC? This is causation. The one before it, what were the most important reasons for the failure of the Operation Market Garden? Causation. The one before it is significance. The first one is perspectives, because historians will reflect, at times sharp differences in their interpretations why a group of people were deported and for what reasons. And here the word systematic, okay, makes perspective a good concept to consider. Okay. The internal assessment also requires from the students, those who are conducting the investigation, is to use a wide variety of written sources. From experience, the number should go 10 and above, okay? Examiners seem to like the use of a substantial number of historical resources, which is reflective of, you know, a thorough investigation. We can do a historical investigation on field work, a museum, archaeological site, battlefields, places of worship, such as mosques or churches, historical buildings. Someone who is living in Istanbul has a wealth of cultural, historical buildings that reflect a lot about architectural genre and techniques and ornamentation and structures and function. Okay, we can easily do that, but it needs, you know, a very the availability of sources that would guide the students in doing such an investigation. A local history study, if I'm teaching my students about European history and they live in a country that has a significant, important historical perspective that the students want to study, there is nothing that prevents them from doing that, because we are open-minded as educators, IB educators. The investigation must be very organized, but we need, meaning that, yes, in addition to knowledge and understanding, we should also analyze and synthesize knowledge through the consideration of different perspectives, for example. And the investigation part, which is part 2, should have a conclusion that the student draws from the analysis conducted. And also, it is important to use a wide range of evidence to support the argument, because perspectives are also very important to use. If possible and if available, encourage your students to use both primary and secondary sources of information. This has been taken from the guide on pages 85 and 86.
Hi, Muna.
Yes.
Wanted to
Okay.
quickly remind you that we have 15 minutes, and
okay,
we'd love to take some questions at the end. Yeah.
I'll go.
Yeah.
We will go into the research question to be debatable, open to different interpretations, should not pose the limitation of a simple narrative, should be specific and narrowed down to be focused, and should observe the 10 year frame. And this we have already done. And let's do the historical moderation of also an investigation done by one of my students. I will give you 10 minutes to do that so that we can spend the last 5 minutes answering your questions. Okay, you can start. On the tablet, there is an internal posted for you, and please do the poll. Okay, 6 participants or 7 participants participated in the assessment. 6 of them seems to concur with the grade that I myself have given to the historical assessment, and it hasn't been changed by the external examiner, as would be shown to you here. Okay. This is, now we need to put the comments. This has been awarded 21 over 25, 5 over 6 for A, B 13 over 5, and C 3 over 4. And the overall is 21 over 25. Extensive feedback has been put by me because this has been sent for external moderation, and no change in grade has affected. Giving this kind of investigation, don't be draconian in your assessment. Don't be too lenient or too harsh on the students. I saw that one of the moderators gave 7 to 9 for the investigation. This also reflects that sometimes as moderators and as of students' work, we are bound to disagree but disagreement within the same mark band is not a problem. Usually it is an occurrence. When it goes down too much or up too much, that's when we standardize student works, we disagree. Questions? We still have a little bit of time. Shall I look at the chat?
Yeah, anybody who has questions can just drop them in the chat. Feel free to write. And while they're doing that, Mona, before in the session, I observed that there was one conversation that was taking place in the chat, which was about the length of paper and the time taken to attend to certain topics. Like a lot of teachers were discussing amongst themselves that they sometimes have to kind of choose and maybe just do Mao and Hitler. Some of them were able to do World War I and II and 2-3 things, but some couldn't, and that was like quite a topic of discussion among them. And do you think there's any suggestion or any comment that you can give on that?
Teaching, the topics that, the time allocation.
Yeah, like over the course of study, not in the paper, like the 45 minutes and 60 minutes, but also the topics that have to be covered before assessment.
From my own experience, the time allocation provided by the IB is not enough for students who are working in a second language. You can never allocate 90 hours. And I have indicated this for the revision team. Now they are reviewing. Like, how can I teach 3 topics for the higher level paper in 90 hours and 2 topics for paper 2 in 90 hours? This remains a challenge for all of us. And that the suggestion or the advice is to make our students do a lot of the reading on their own. But do they? This is the catch-22 question that we often pose, and when we are designing the course, when we are allocating time in accordance to the guide, those challenges will remain to reflect themselves.
Thank you, Mona.
Okay. So
Anya has a question. She's asked, sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing it correct. Anya is asking, how much does an IA be over word limit?
How much an IA?
Is over word limit. How much does an IA be over word limit?
2,200. It's in the guide. At the end of the guide, at the end of the assessment criteria, there is a table that gives you exactly the time, the word limit for the internal for the historical investigation, which is 2,200 words divided between the 3 sections.
All right. So Anya's kind of asking again, is 2,500 too much as a clarification?
25?
Is 2,500 too much?
It's 2,200. No, it's not too much. You know, especially when you start, when you do the investigation year after year, and students have to consider different perspectives related to historical research question. No, it's not too much. It's very manageable, actually.
Cool. Any other questions? Please feel free to write. Otherwise, we can also wrap up.
I think Vaibhav has a question.
Yeah, history IA topic needs to be less than how many? Okay, so Vaibhav's question is for history IA, the topics, you know, how many years should they be less than? Should they be less than 10 years?
No, it should be at least 10, yani it should have happened 10 years ago and before. You know, it could, but yani, for example, we are in 2022. We can't write about any historical event that happened beyond 2012 and better 2011. For example, we can't, something called the Arab Spring happened in 2011. We can talk about the causes in Libya, in Yemen, in Egypt, okay, but we can't talk about the consequences because they are still unraveling.
All right. Thank you so much, Mona. This has been great. Just thank you in general for the whole session, and I'm sure that everyone who joined in is taking away very useful insights. Before we finish, just a quick note again. If you're interested in knowing more about how you can use Toddle at your school, we do a quick walkthrough to show you the DP planning module in 15 minutes at 10:45 GMT. Do drop into that session and you can use the link in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Thank you again, Mona. You were wonderful.
Thank you very
Stay
much
safe.
for the attendees, and it's been a great pleasure, really, to see some of the, you know, very familiar faces and colleagues and the others also. Thank you very much for giving me this chance, and hope to see you again.
Yes, see you. Hope to see you all again at the next event. Bye-bye. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.